please do take your seats. And could the stewards please distribute Bibles to people who would like to follow what I'm about to read? That would be very, very helpful. If you've come this evening, you haven't brought a Bible, and you'd like to follow a portion of the Bible that I'm about to read to you now, then just let the stewards know, and they'll give you a Bible so you can use it. And when you find it, when you get it, can you please turn to page 840, I beg your pardon. Page 840. For those of you that are using electronic Bibles or have brought your own, you're going to need to find a passage in the New Testament, which is Luke chapter 7. I'm going to read in a moment just a few verses from that story. So page 840 or Luke chapter 7 if you're not following in the church Bibles. I want to tell you a story about a woman whose name I don't know. And then I want to help you to understand why I've chosen that story tonight on the night that Hannah's getting baptized. Page 840, Luke chapter 7. This woman lived in an area in the Middle East where Jesus lived and walked when he was alive and on the earth. You can hear her story in this portion of the Bible, but there's another story that's very like it that's told in other parts, but I think it's a slightly different one. The story of this woman is this. She had a bit of a dodgy past. She was probably someone who was working on the streets because she didn't have enough money for her family and she didn't have enough resources to look after them. And she ended up having to do things that she didn't want to do and live in a way that she wasn't happy with at all, that made her feel useless, dirty, unwanted, and unloved. And then she met Jesus Christ. And Jesus completely changed her life. He gave her a new meaning. He gave her a new purpose. He gave her a new identity. He took this woman that everybody else had laughed at and mocked and made fun of, a woman that other people had used, a woman that people didn't even notice was there. And he gave her a really new sense of dignity and value. And her whole life was changed as a result of that. I want to read the story of just one moment in this woman's life. We'll never know her name. We don't know who she is. We don't know anything about her background. We don't know anything about her family. We just know that she loved Jesus Christ because of what he'd done in her life and in her heart. And it changed her forever. So page 840, Luke chapter 7. We're going to read from verses 36 to 40 to 50. Here we go. One of the Pharisees, that's a lawyer, asked Jesus to eat with him. And he went into the Pharisee's house and took his place at the table. And a woman in the city who was a sinner, having learned that he was eating in the Pharisee's house, brought in an alabaster jar, that's a porcelain jar, full of ointment. She stood behind him at his feet, weeping, and began to bathe his feet with her tears and to dry them with her hair. Then she continued kissing his feet and anointing them with the ointment. Now when the Pharisees who had invited him saw it, he said to himself, if this man were a prophet, he would have known who and what kind of woman this is who is touching him, that she's a sinner. Jesus spoke up and said to him, Simon, I have something to say to you. Teacher, he replied, speak. Jesus says, a certain creditor had two debtors. One owed him 500 denarii and the other 50. When they could not pay, he cancelled the debts for both of them. Now, which of them will love him more? Simon answered, I suppose the one for whom he cancelled the greater debt. And Jesus said to him, you have judged rightly. Then turning toward the woman, he said to Simon, do you see this woman? I entered your house. You gave me no water for my feet, but she has bathed my feet with her tears and dried them with her hair. You gave me no kiss. But from the time I came in, she has not stopped kissing my feet. You did not anoint my feet with ointment, my head with oil, but she has anointed my feet with ointment. Therefore I tell you, her sins, which were many, have been forgiven. Hence she has shown great love. But the one to whom little is forgiven loves little. Then he said to her, "Your sins are forgiven." But those who were at the table with him began to say amongst themselves, "Who is this who even forgives sins?" And he said to the woman, "Your faith has saved you. Go in peace." It's an amazing story. And God always blesses the public reading of the Bible, which is God preaching to us. It's his word, inspired and without error. And I'm grateful for it. When you read that story, you read of this woman whose whole life is turned around. Actually, to get to the heart of the story, you've got to get to verse 47. That's toward the end of the story. After she's done all that she's done, Jesus has a conversation with Simon, who is very tut. He looks at this woman who's come and washed Jesus' feet, and he's very unhappy about it. Who does she think she is, coming into his home and making a spectacle of herself when it's his house and it's his dinner party and he should be the center of attention, not her? And Jesus says to Simon a few verses earlier, after this woman has wiped his feet and dried them with her hair, "Did you even notice her? Did you even see this woman?" You see, to get the context of the story, when people sat down to eat in the time that Jesus was alive, they didn't sit at a dining table like you and I sit at with chairs around it and a knife and fork in front of us and all of us facing one another nice and politely. They would lie on a couch. I think it's a pretty good idea for eating, actually. They would lie on a couch and they would put their head on their arm and their feet, so the couch would be positioned so that the front of it was in toward a big central table. And the back of it, their legs went out the back. So they'd be lying on their sides with their feet sticking out. Imagine a clock face. Well, their feet would be sticking away from the center of their clock, and the head would be in the center. And when a big public dinner like this happened, loads of people would come. And there weren't electric lights so you could see everything. There were candle lights and little lamps that were made of terracotta that would have been around the room. It would have been bright, but not very bright. And you would have been able to see each other's faces, but you wouldn't really have been able to see what was happening outside. So they're all lying down, having dinner. Simon's put on this posh party. Everybody's come. All the important folk have come because they want to be seen to be with Simon, who's a Pharisee. He's got money and power and influence. And they want to hear this remarkable man, Jesus, and all that he's claimed to do. But this woman hears about what's happening, presumably, and she's already known Jesus. She's met him somewhere. We don't know where. We just know that her whole life was changed by him. And she gets to the party. And she brings with her a little jar, probably about half the size of this jug. And in it is perfume called spikenard, probably worth about a year's wages for an ordinary working person in those days. It's precious, and it's in a box that you have to break to get into. And whilst everybody else is chattering and they're all looking at each other, this woman stands in the darkness of the room. Nobody would have noticed her, except Jesus. And she starts to cry. And her tears fall on his feet. Tears of thankfulness. Tears because she knows what a difference Jesus has made in their life. And then she undoes her long hair. And she starts to dry his feet with her hair. And then she breaks open this jar of perfume. At that moment, the smell would have begun to fill the room. People would have started to notice. And she anoints his feet, and she starts to rub this perfume into his feet. And the posh dude that's running the party, Simon, gets cross, and he says, if Jesus knew that this woman was doing this and who she was, he would be saying something to her. Jesus reads his mind. And he turns and he says this to Simon, Simon, let me tell you a story. There were two people who owed a person a lot of money. For the sake of the argument tonight, one of them owed him £5,000 and the other owed him £50. And this man said to the two people that owed him money, the debt's cancelled. Which one do you think would be most grateful? Well, who do you think would be most grateful? You can answer me, I don't bite. Of course the man that had been given the biggest amount of money, right? And that's exactly what Simon says. Well, the guy that owed the most and got the debt cancelled would be the most grateful, wouldn't he? And Simon says, Jesus says to Simon, that's exactly right. And that's why this woman is wiping my feet with her hair. She's been forgiven so much. And he says to Simon, I came into your house. You're supposed to wash my feet when I arrive. You didn't bother. She did. You're supposed to dry them, but you didn't bother. She did. You're supposed to anoint my feet with olive oil after a long day's walk so they're not sore, or your servants are supposed to. They didn't bother. She did. And he says this to Simon. He says, this woman is grateful because she has been forgiven so much. In one version of the Bible called The Message, verse 47 has it this way: she was forgiven many, many sins, and so she is very, very grateful. If the forgiveness is minimal, the gratitude is minimal. Let's think about this woman for a minute. She's amazing, I think. Nobody else noticed her. How often have women been unnoticed? But that's another conversation for another evening. She came into this room that wasn't her own, and she came to the right person. She came to Jesus. She had the right perspective. Everybody else was all about the prestige and the power of what was happening in this moment. She was about saying thank you to Jesus for what he'd done for her. She just wanted him to know that she loved him, that she was grateful to him. And she kept focused on the right person. I don't think it would be fair to say that she didn't worry about the other people. I think this woman was probably pretty nervous about the other people, don't you? A room full of men. She probably thought, they know me, they'll make fun of me. She knew she could get in trouble. She knew she could get thrown out. She knew she could end up in jail. She knew she could end up losing business. She knew that this was a dangerous thing to do. So why did she do it? Why did she take the risk? Here's why. She did it because she was grateful. She was grateful for what Jesus had done. Let me take one moment and talk to those of you who are already followers of Jesus Christ. Don't allow yourself to end up doing church because it's a habit. Don't become religious. Don't come and let the words of songs trot out of our mouths without thinking about what they say. Don't worry about what other people think about you. Don't worry about being extravagant. I mean, a year's salary is a lot of money to spend on a bit of perfume to put in somebody's feet, right? She didn't care what people thought. Do you know why? She was grateful. She was grateful for the difference that God had made in her life. She was grateful that she'd been forgiven. She was grateful that she'd found somebody who was a friend. She was grateful that she'd been accepted. She was grateful that she'd found somewhere where she could be herself. No wonder she wanted to put the ointment on Jesus' feet. Tonight, in a gathering like this, we don't just sing songs. We're saying we're grateful. We don't just put money into a basket. We're saying we're grateful. Why would this woman, 2,000 years ago, make such a spectacle of herself? For the same reason that in a few moments, a teenager is going to make a spectacle of herself, and a brilliant spectacle at it, Hannah. Why would Hannah Parkin, in front of her mates, for goodness sake, from school, who are already thinking these people are weird, just a little bit, right? Yeah, right. Why would Hannah Parkin come up and walk down the steps into this baking hot, luxuriously completed baptismal pool? Why would she stand in front of you, people that she doesn't know that well, and tell her story? Why would a teenager do that? Because she's got more guts than some of us as adults have. Because she's willing to do this, and we're not. Why would she do it? What on earth would possess you, Hannah? Why would you do that? Here's what possesses her: Jesus. She's going into this water because she loves Jesus. She's going into this water because she's been forgiven by Jesus. She's going into the water because she doesn't care what you think about her. What she cares about is what Jesus thinks about her. And she has found in him a friend. And she's not embarrassed by him. She's not afraid of what people will think. And when she's getting baptized, she's obeying a command of the Bible that says, when you love Jesus and you've surrendered your life to him, you need to get baptized. Now, in many church traditions, that happens when children are babies, when they're not yet believers, and then they confirm it later by going through an act called confirmation. But here in this church, when people become Christians and they decide to follow Jesus, after that, they get baptized. And as Hannah goes into the water, it's like a declaration that her old life is gone. It's like a burial. When she's pulled out of the water, it's like a declaration that she's got new life. Jesus was buried after he'd died on the cross. Hannah will be buried in this water. 3 days later, Jesus was risen from the dead. We're not going to leave Hannah in for 3 days. You'll be all right. Then we're going to pull her up out of the water. Do you know why? Because she has new life. How grateful are you? Those of you that are already Christians, how grateful are you? We can end up doing the grudge of religious life. And it almost becomes something that we do out of obligation or guilt or fear. No wonder then church gets boring, eh? Because everybody's here and nobody wants to be. But when you're grateful, you want to say thank you. You want to declare something. You want to be part of a community. It's exciting and life-giving and joy-bringing. And when you sing and when you pray and when you give and when you worship and when you meet together, there's life in it. It's not boring or life-destroying or stultifyingly tedious. It is life-giving. I hope that's how those of us that are Christians see our worship and our life for God. I hope it is. But if I'm being really honest, it's not always how I feel. There are moments when I get up on a Sunday morning and I think, oh, another Sunday. So I have to make a choice. I have to decide, I'm going to be grateful today. I'm going to be grateful for what God has done. I'm going to be grateful for who he is. I'm going to find things to be grateful for. Anybody had a bad week? Don't tell me. Maybe through the rest of this service, you might find 2 or 3 things to be grateful for. Friends that have prayed for you. A God that loves you. Somebody that sent you a card, a telephone conversation that helped. We have far more to be grateful for than we have to complain about. Reaching 40 and surviving. That was aimed at one person, but you don't need to know who. What are you grateful for? And for those of you that are not yet Christians, and you think this is all a bit odd, why do they raise their hands when they sing? Because we're grateful to God for what he's done in Jesus. Why do they sound like they really mean it? Because we really mean it. We really are excited about God. We really think he's the best thing since sliced bread. We really do believe that he can change a life. And it doesn't matter whether you're 7 or 8 or 80 or 90. When Jesus Christ died on the cross, he died for you. And you might have come here this evening and you've never ever heard the gospel. Here it is for you in a nutshell. God died for you. He sent his son to save and rescue you. He took everything that you've done wrong and he put it on his son at the cross. And he took the perfect life of Jesus and he gave it to you so that you could be forgiven. So that you could be God's friend. So that you could know joy and meaning and purpose. So that you could have a fresh start. So that that sense that you have about yourself that you're useless and worthless and you'll never amount to anything could be lifted and could be replaced with this wonderful promise. You're my son and you're my daughter and I love you. And I want you to know that if you let me come into your life, I'll never leave you. I'll never abandon you. You'll never be on your own again. Life might be difficult. Things might happen that you don't want. But God never leaves those people who surrender their lives to him.